Welcome to the Bobcast, here with head coach Guy Robertson of Frostburg State Baseball. Coach Robertson entering his 11th season with Frostburg State. Last year, 17-19 overall, 8-10 in the CAC, tied for 6th with Mary Washington, just missing out on the playoffs, losing on the final day of the regular season in the conference play by 1 run in both games to Mary Wash. This is a Frostburg team that graduates 8 seniors, 2 All-CACers in J.T. Tipton and Brad Garrett. Coach, how does your team bounce back from last season, missing the postseason, which is something that hasn't occurred in quite a long time at the helm of the program?
Well, I think it's, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's hard to, I think, put some of that stuff out of your mind. I think that the players are probably doing a better job of it than we are as coaches. I know that was something that really drove what we were trying to do when we brought the team together in the fall. It motivated us to change some things, look at some things differently. It certainly motivated us from a recruiting standpoint, going out and try to revamp the roster, getting some more talent in here and, replacing the guys that we lost, and also trying to upgrade at positions that we had guys coming back at, but just decided that, hey, this wasn't working the way we were doing it, and we need to go back and kind of relook at things and try to revamp and retool. And I think that we did a pretty good job of that. The biggest thing I would say that, was an issue, not just lack of talent, but it was lack of chemistry. I think we had some guys that were worried about themselves too much and not worried about the program and worried about where we were headed as a group. And we didn't create that family atmosphere that we wanted to last year. So certainly that was a driving force between, how we went out and looked at guys and the guys that we brought back in. And we were very proactive in the transfer market, trying to upgrade in many places. And the coaching staff did a good job of that. And I think we started to see kind of the fruits of our labor in the fall. Some things started to come together. Started to see kind of how the guys would form a cohesive group and how we could kind of bounce some guys around from position to position and just be deeper and more talented and feel like that we had options, in particular places that we haven't had in the past, or at least we didn't last year.
Speaking of options you've had in the past, Greg Schneider is the leading pitcher for your team, 3-time All-Conference, second straight first-team year, the League Rookie of the Year in 15, an All-American in his career. Having that ace in his senior season, what does that bring to your team, the rest of your team, the rest of your pitching staff, knowing that you have him on a consistent basis to go out and do his thing?
Well, I think obviously when you feel like you can put the load on one guy's shoulders, especially a pitcher, I think it brings a certain amount of ease to the rest of the group to feel like you have a great chance to win every time he gets the ball, which we have over the last 3 years. So I certainly think that that's a great place to start. If you had to return one guy coming off the season that we had and bring back a player of his caliber as a senior, and hopefully he can take some of the leadership role and reins and really run with it this year and set an example. I think it just brings a certain level of confidence to the rest of the ball club that a lot of other teams aren't privy to, and I certainly think that's a help. But at the same time, if you look at what, he only had a 4-4 record last year. So, in the past, you look at his overall record and you look at, hey, we won a ton of games when he was on the mound. Well, we didn't do that as much last year. Well, that's a direct result of the run support that he didn't get. So, even when you have a horse like that can go out and give you a chance to win, it doesn't guarantee it for you. So we, I think, have to reflect on some of the things that occurred last year and realize it's not a foregone conclusion that just because Greg's got the ball on the mound that particular day that's going to result in what we want. We still have to go out and do our jobs and take care of the baseball defensively and get timely hits, or at least do some of the little things that can produce some runs. I mean, typically it doesn't take a lot of runs to win a ball game with Greg's on the mound, but we didn't produce hardly any runs sometimes when he was on the mound. I can think of one time last year where we lost a 3-2 ball game to Penn State Harrisburg, where he pitched all 10 innings, and we had plenty of chances to score runs without getting a hit, and we didn't produce. So you have days like that, but, it can't just be, oh, Greg's on the mound, things are just going to fall into place for us. You still got to go out and do your job, and you still got to go out and, push the pedal down sometimes and take advantage of opportunities that other teams give you and, do the right things. And I think that we need to look at that, and we'll have a little more perspective on things, having gone through what we went through last year as a team. But certainly having a guy like that is what every ball club wishes for if you're going to be relevant in the conference and beyond.
What does the rest of the rotation potentially look like here on February the 12th?
Yeah, so, you look back at what we had overall from a pitching staff standpoint, it was ugly last year. We brought in a ton of new guys. I would say that our starting rotation is going to look different, and that was one of our goals. We went out and brought in Brady Adam. We went out and brought in Marco Cardone, both junior college transfers. I hope that they come in and that they, push or right near the top of our rotation. By doing that, I think it's going to allow us to put some guys in positions to be more successful in the roles that they'll have this year versus what they had to do last year. We were stuck in some spots last year with some injuries and some poor performances where we had to ask more of guys than I think that we would hoped to have. And, this year I think that those guys are going to be slotted in some spots where they are a little bit more capable. One of the other things that I think that went really, unnoticed last year, or maybe was the loss of Nick Huff in 2016, a guy that was super reliable coming out of the bullpen in a lot of different spots. We just didn't really have a really lockdown guy, in the back end of our bullpen last year that we could go and rely on that was going to get the job done. We brought in another guy, Mike Livingston, and transferred from Potomac State, who has really, really looked like he's going to, thrive in that role. He's a guy who could go multiple innings. He's not just a one-inning guy, but he's just got the right makeup and mentality to kind of be on the back end of our bullpen. So with that, we bolstered the starting staff. We feel like we've got a guy we can rely on the back end. That's going to put some guys in, fourth, fifth, sixth starter type roles that, they're more conducive to. Their matchups are going to be more conducive to their skill set, and it's certainly going to make our bullpen deeper and hopefully going to have to rely on guys for less innings at one time, which will make them, better suited for their skill set as well. Just off the top of my head, guys like Trent Eric and Mike Takovich, who were multiple innings, kind of back-to-back days type guys last year, where we hopefully, we can use them once in a weekend and allow them just go out there and do what they do. It will be, better suited for a guy like Dan Rysick, and if, Dan Richardson started a bunch of games for us, I can see him be more of a tweener type guy where he could start and relieve, do some different things for us depending on the matchup. Logan Corrigan, same type of thing. So I'm, I didn't name everybody, but, I think it's important. Lane Ward was a guy that was hurt and threw, I think, 12 innings for us last year, where he threw a ton of innings as a sophomore. I think he threw one conference inning for us last year, where I think he was second or third on the team in conference innings pitched in 2016. So he's another guy that will get back and is healthy and can do more for us this year than he's going to have done last year. So I think when you look at the pitching staff overall, it's definitely more talented. It's definitely deeper. And those guys that return are understand that we have to get a better effort. And I think it was, pretty much right in their face with the number of new guys that we brought in, because last year was just completely unacceptable. And, we've seen it in their work, in the time that they've put in, their preparation here over the last couple weeks in the preseason. And I certainly think that there's a renewed focus, and the guys are excited about taking on this task of the underperformance that they had last year and coming back and really, achieving to a more capable level than they did in the past.
Before we go, I want to touch on the lineup in the field. 4 starters that potentially could return to the lineup this year. Kyle Berger, Matt Bogard, highlighting those 2 starters. Open spots available. What have you seen from your returners? What newcomers do you have in those spots?
Yeah, so, right now we would probably return starters at center field, right field, the aforementioned guys that you mentioned, Colton Civic and Pat Bosley. Pat, who was hurt the majority of last year and didn't play nearly as much as he was slated to at the beginning of the season because of a shoulder injury, will be back and right now will occupy first base. I think that will put Logan Corrigan in a position to DH more and be more of a pitching threat than he was last year. We had to use him more at first base than we wanted. Civic will get the first go at third base after an average junior season, to be honest with you. We're expecting a lot more out of him this year, and he's going to get the first go of it. But that's not a given. He's going to have to earn the opportunity day in and day out and go out there and be more consistent than he showed us last year. 3 brand new catchers. We don't return a single catcher to our roster. We went out and brought in 3 transfers. That's worked out pretty well so far. I'm excited to see what those guys can bring to the table. 2 starters at shortstop, or new starters at shortstop and second base, both transfers. So we went out and tried to revamp that position with the losses that we had, and we feel like we upgraded not only in the loss category, but upgraded in depth and upgraded in talent. Replacing JT Tipton is going to be a very difficult task. I mean, he was pretty much a 4-year starter, achieved a ton here while he was here, and like you mentioned at the beginning, that he was an all-conference performer. So that's going to be no small task replacing him. But we think that we have a group in the middle infield with Devin Griffith coming back and Duncan Polar. The addition of Brett Fogel could spend some time in the middle. With Brock Antignoni and Nick Furman will probably occupy those middle spots at least for the start. And then you look at the outfield. Evan Colon, we call him Manny, will probably get some time in left field. And newcomers Josh Clegg and Marquise Washington will battle for time there as well. But you also look at the opportunity to put Greg Schneider back out there and spend some more time as a two-way player than maybe he did last year and the year before, more like he did as a utility All-American as a freshman. We tried to utilize him that way a little bit more last year. It just didn't work out. And then Brady Adams is also a very formidable outfielder in his own right. So I think it's just about balancing those two guys from a pitching standpoint and what they could take on as an outfielder as well. So we have some depth and talent out there. We got some decisions to be made, but that's a good problem to have that we didn't necessarily have last year. And I think that we have good problems all over the diamond that we didn't necessarily have last year, and that was certainly one of our goals with bringing in 16 new players. The majority of those guys transfers, and just want to go out and get back to where we're more accustomed to being. It's been a long time since this program hasn't been in the conference mix. And like I said, that's totally unacceptable. The coaching staff took that personally, and we're going to do everything in our power. And have tried to do everything in our power over the last 9 months to try and get back where we feel we belong, and that's with the conference elites. And make a push for postseason play. If we get the opportunity.
I was really impressed with the pedigree that this program has. The 70s, the NAIA days, the World Series team a couple of seasons ago. Your expectations that they remain up with them?
Yeah, I think going into the 2015 season, we always wondered where the ceiling was for this program. You deal with a lot of things. You deal with weather difficulties. You deal with facility issues because of the weather. We travel a lot early, and there's just a lot of hurdles that the guys a part of this program have to overcome. But I think that 2015 hit, and you realize that the sky's the limit maybe. And that we really didn't have any limitations. They were only ones that we put on ourselves, whether it's from a performance standpoint or from a health standpoint. But if we go out and recruit the type of players that we feel like we're capable of getting, that we're capable of recruiting and competing against the highest level in the country. And, we proved that in 2015. We went out and we had another really good season in 2016. And I think that the people, at least around the region, expect Frostburg State to be a formidable opponent every time they have us on the schedule. And if they come up against us in a regional, that they know that they're going to have their hands full. And we've been able to go out and play a certain style of ball. And I think that's a really tough, gritty, style of play. And we want to be hard-nosed, and every time we take the field. And we didn't really accomplish that last year, and it was disappointing. And like I said, maybe the best thing I can describe last year was just unacceptable. And, I don't foresee that happening, but I didn't foresee it happening last year in 2017 either. So we have to stay healthy, we have to stay focused, and we have to go out and handle our business. But I know that the talent is here. If we can build the chemistry over the first couple of weeks while we're on the road, getting on and off the bus is good for stuff like that. Being in the hotel together for 2 and 3 nights at a time, and just having to try to figure out us as a group of 36 players and coaches. With a lot of new guys coming in, just trying to figure out how we go about our business on a week-to-week basis, and being able to be away from distractions here at home. You typically don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff. You can just focus on baseball and focus on each other. And I would look forward to that task over the next couple of weeks, really the first month of the season, being away and getting out and doing some of these things that we get to do together as a group. And just excited to kind of hit the ground running. The energy's been really high over the last 2 weeks, probably as high as I've ever seen it. The focus and attention to detail has been as high as I've ever seen at this time of year. And really, I think the guys are just looking to get out and put the uniform on and go get dirty.
We're excited for the start of the season as well. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you, Coach.
Appreciate your time.
Back on the Bobcast, we are speaking to Frostburg State University softball head coach Wes Landrum, entering his 13th season at the helm of the Bobcats. And Coach, CAC Coach of the Year, ECAC Coach of the Year, coming off 3 straight 20-win seasons, top 3 in the CAC standings, another CAC tournament. The Bobcats have made the tournament every year since joining the conference in 2011. Last year, a second-place finish in the regular season. Close losses in the tournament to CNU and Mary Washington. How relevant would you say last year even is, Coach, to talking about this season, considering the massive roster turnover your team has had due to graduation?
It's relevant in the sense of the 3 kids who are back as starters were all first-team all-conference kids. Otherwise, you can pretty much wipe the board clean. So, a lot of different kids and a lot of new positions.
This is your 13th season. Have you ever had this much turnover 1 year to the next year? How did you handle it then? How are you handling it now?
No. We've never lost 6 starters in a year. In 2013, we had, I want to say 4 freshmen started pretty much all year. But this year, there's an opportunity for 6 kids to get a lot more playing time. So, as far as handling it, I think you just try to teach them how we play. So it's falling on those 3 seniors who are all comeback starters, and then hopefully they help show them the way.
As far as those 3 players returning, of course you're talking about seniors Allison Short, 2-time first-team pitcher, Brittany Platt, first-team third baseman, Sam Gatton, first-team All-CAC and All-ECAC outfielder, second in the CAC with batting average. For those 3 players specifically, how important is it to have them back in their respective roles where you can plug them in the lineup, in the field, and in the circle? How good can they make you just the baseline of those 3 players alone?
Comfortability. I think that's where their talents fall for us. It's a known quantity, whereas whether it's young ladies who've been on the roster and haven't played a whole lot, or freshmen that have just joined us, it's a matter of them getting playing time, and the known factor is not there, and the confidence in those 3 kids specifically is there, and those younger players on the team have that in them just from their success. So.
Specifically, Allison Short as a pitcher who can keep games low scoring, relatively close. How much comfort do you have, and how much easier is this year overall, knowing that you have potentially the ace of the entire conference in the circle for your team, and how much confidence does that give the rest of your group?
I think it's a lot of confidence. I think it's a lot of pressure on her, I think, sometimes to keep us in every game. Mm-hmm. Last year, especially, we didn't score a whole lot of runs for her. But it's a super easy factor for me to know we're going to be in every game if she's pitching. So I think that comfortability factor with me resonates within the team. I think they see a calmness with her and her competitiveness, and they can feed off of that.
One thing I've noticed about your team the last several years is one of the top 10 teams or top 15 teams in the nation in terms of fielding percentage, number 11 in the nation last year, another really high mark the year before. You're in Frostburg, Maryland, where there was snow on the ground yesterday. Your team has not been able to practice outside very often. How are you able to get those sort of results defensively despite a lack of field time early on?
Really talented kids, and kids who buy into, a lot of basic repetition. Basically, we're stuck inside for a lot of it, so they understand the surface we play on is rubber. They won't play on a faster surface, so the ability to play fast inside, I believe, does translate outside, albeit a different surface, which isn't the best, but at the end of the day, the ability to play fast inside does help us. We don't have a ton of strikeout pitchers, so the ability to play and make simple plays is important for us, and it's what has helped our success, especially the last couple of years.
This is a roster that has 4 upperclassmen, 1 junior, 3 seniors. You graduate 6 seniors from last season, 5 of them who were really big contributors. What is leadership in softball, and how have your remaining players stepped into leadership roles, and how have you gotten potentially leadership from even underclassmen on your roster thus far?
I mean, I think leadership takes a lot of different avenues. I think, most importantly, it's the older girls showing the younger girls on this roster what the expectation level is, when we travel, from an at-bat standpoint, how do we handle adversity? So a lot of different things that those younger players that are now more senior on the roster have experienced. We've had a very good group of kids the last half dozen years that have kind of, I think, elevated our program a lot just from how they've handled themselves. We've spent a lot of time on those, the mental aspect of our game. We do fail a lot, so how do we deal with adversity and those types of things? As far as your second part of your question with the younger ladies on the roster, I think you don't want to take away leadership opportunities from them, and I think that's where we've had success, is allowing those first year and second year players to sort of have a say in what we do is important, because they develop ownership, which then translates, further down the line.
3 seniors back, other 6 spots. Here we are, the third week of February. How nailed down are you on who goes where, and how far into the season do you go in terms of experimenting if you don't know today who goes where in those final 6 spots on your team?
we have an idea of where everyone is February 12th.
Uh-huh.
As far as how far in the season we go experimenting, I mean, I think a lot. I think, giving these kids opportunities is what makes them successful. So I can't give you a finite answer. I can give you a finite answer for who's going to start game 1, but I can't give you a finite answer for that if that's going to be our best lineup. And also, from a batting lineup standpoint, what pieces best fit together is always, ever changing a little bit, but not being able to get outside, not being able to sort of get a ton of reps on a field, a lot of our fixing happens in games, which is very tough. So it's a matter of continually trying to find the best 10 kids that let us win.
This Frostburg softball team is a great unknown relative to a lot of the teams we've had coming into the year. What are the expectations that you have for this team this year?
No different. I think we need to compete for the CAC. We've shown, in the last, 6 years now we've been in this conference, that we can compete, day in and day out with the best teams. We finished, I want to say second or third, every year in regular season. Sometimes it's a matter of, a ball dropping here or there in the tournament, which has not happened for us in a positive manner, but I think that's the expectation. I don't think youth doesn't scare me. Youth is only youth the first, couple games of the season. I think once everyone gets a chance to play, it's a matter of who can execute, and that's our job, to get them to execute.
Finally, how excited is your team to finally go out and compete against other teams and get out of the gym?
I think seeing the stuff, the green stuff on the ground would be fantastic. Our rubber looks like dirt, so maybe not so much brown. But I think it's we definitely get that. I don't even know what I want to say, but just cabin fever a little bit of being inside, and there's only so much space and so many different things to do. So they're super excited. I think. I'm excited. I think that's what we practice is the hard part, and games are supposed to be the fun part. So.
Frostburg softball. We're looking forward to it. Wes Landrum, thank you for making your debut on the Bobcast.
Thank you, Andy.
For the first time this season, we are speaking to men's lacrosse head coach Tommy Pierce, coming into his 8th season with the Bobcats. Men's lacrosse last season, 9-7 overall, 5-3 in conference, tied for 3rd in the conference. However, the Bobcats ended as the 5th seed and lost in the first round to Mary Washington. And despite a winning record, top 4 conference finish, a season that was in ways a small step back Frostburg had averaged 14.5 wins per year over the last 4 seasons before last year. The first year since the Bobcats have gone to the CAC semifinals, have not gone to the semifinals since 2013. What I get from all of that is expectations are very high here for you and your program, Tommy Pierce. So what can you say about last season, where it fit into what you expected, and how do you respond this year?
Part of that win-loss record comes from us, with the success we've had every year. A lot of teams have been more open to playing us than in the past. So in our first several years here, we were trying to make a pretty tough schedule, but a lot of those top teams out there weren't really interested in playing. So, I think our schedule gets a little bit tougher every year. And then, last year I think our defense did a pretty good job. We had trouble scoring goals. So we had a couple big wins last year. Obviously, Cabrini was one of the best wins we've ever had.
Highest ranked ever for Frostburg lacrosse.
Right. F&M was a great win. I think after we beat F&M, they went on to be undefeated for the remainder of the season until they lost in the NCAA tournament. So a couple great wins, and then a couple, I believe we lost to York when they were, whatever they were ranked, we lost to them by 1 goal, and I think 4 2-goal losses. So, the record is what it is, but a lot of those games are really close, and what we're doing right now is really trying to just focus on the details, the little things that can make a 1-goal difference, 1-goal, 2-goal difference in a game. Really, as far as possessions and being a little bit better on the offensive end. We think our defense did a pretty good job last year, and our offense maybe, at the end of the day should have been scoring a couple more goals, and that might have been kind of what made the difference in that record last year as opposed to years prior.
You hit all the highlights I had for last year. 5 of 7 losses by 2 goals or less. Right. 2 NCAA tournament team win on the road, F&M and Cabrini. Mm-hmm. I want to hit on just some turnover for your team. You lost 5 senior contributors, face-off specialists, top short stick defensive midfielder, a couple of long stick midfielders, a starting midfielder. What did you lose in terms of leadership, production, and how do you replace that?
Leadership was huge. Obviously, I know Chris Santina and Alex Phillips, had been our top long stick middies for a couple years. But, Nick Mattis has had the opportunity to play with those guys, and, Greg Giles as a junior, really coming into his own and getting an opportunity. So I think that because those young guys were behind those guys, they're ready to step in and fill those roles. On the offensive end of the field, we get the bulk of our guys back. But as I said, those guys didn't score a ton of goals last year, so they all have to be better. So just getting guys back on the offensive end isn't necessarily as comforting because we weren't a great offensive team. So with losing some offense, obviously, the team has to come together. We've got a couple young guys that are going to contribute there. But I think that, when you lose leadership, what you hope is that the guys that are just behind them are ready to lead because of the way they saw those other guys lead. So hopefully, if they did a good job as leaders, then losing your leaders shouldn't impact you too much if they've been showing other guys the way.
Sure. And hopefully, you come from a great program at Gettysburg where winning is just the way it is. And
right.
Coach Janzik, am I saying that right?
Yes.
What he's won so many games in his career and built a culture.
Right.
How do you feel that starting a new program, here you are, year 8, which is more years than you've actually been here.
Right.
How has that process been going, and how is this year sort of reflecting, the results this year reflect that culture?
This year's been going great. I think that last year, we kind of talked about last year early this year and said, this is the deal. There were some close games. We got to put last year behind us and make the difference moving forward and, maybe change our approach a little bit, work harder. But, as far as the culture, I always go back to my second year here when we were 2-15. So my first year, we were 6-11 as a first-year program. We were feeling pretty good about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And then we came back our second year, and we were 2-15. And then I think our culture came from the soaking up that 2-15 year, deciding that they wanted to be better. So really, from year 3 on, I think our culture's kind of been in place because some guys realized what they needed to do in order for our program to be a good program. So, what I always tell guys is that, when the freshmen walk onto campus, I shouldn't have to tell them what to do because you're already doing it and they just do what you guys do as far as, work ethic and commitment and, all that other stuff. So, I think that as long as the upperclassmen are working hard, that kind of takes care of a lot of the culture, I never wanted to go 2-15.
Yeah.
But I think, and at the time I didn't see many positives in it, but, 6 years down the road, I look at that 2-15 season as kind of what built our program today.
Yeah, you're into that second generation of
Right.
guys after that season.
Right.
That's really interesting. I do want to hit on the offense, and I remember reading from last year so many different starting combinations for the attack that ended 8th in the CAC in goals per game, 7th in shooting percentage, 7th in shots on goal percentage. How does that improve over the course of the off season, the summer,
Right.
your training camps? How does that get better year to year?
One of the reasons for that varied starting lineups was some injuries. We lost Nate Collins last year with a tendon injury in his foot, and Paul Rupert missed some games with a shoulder injury, and really he was never really 100% when he came back last year. He was playing through some injuries. So, some of that was injury, and some of that was that, we had graduated our entire starting attack the year before, and, some guys got an opportunity to start, and they weren't really producing, so we were giving some other guys some opportunities. So at the attack position last year, we definitely never really settled into a starting lineup over the course of the year.
Sure.
This year, even right now, I think we've got 5 or 6 guys that are still competing. We had a scrimmage on Saturday, and we played all those guys, and some guys did some good things and some bad things, and if there's not one guy that has a position locked up, then we're going to keep it competitive, But hopefully it'll start to solidify itself this year a little bit more than last year, for sure.
Sure, and you had some consistency defensively where
Right.
I look at the last few years, 29th, 22nd, 6th, 31st in the nation in scoring D. That's a top-tier unit. How have you been able to coach and have that success in terms of that stat and overall defense, especially last year with a first-year goalkeeper?
Right. Jack, it's convenient when you have really good goalies. We graduated Tyler Haynes and Tom Kramer was already on campus, and then Jack Marks came in and he was great as a freshman. The other good thing is that in the past years we've been winning a lot of face-offs.
Sure.
So we don't play as much defense, which I think is going to be a little bit of a challenge for us this year. We might not be as dominant at the face-off X as we've had the luxury to be in the past several years. But again, we return a lot of guys. I think we do a pretty good job in recruiting to have depth there, so that when a guy or two graduates, we kind of know who's ready to fill in those roles. And I think my assistant coaches have done a great job. Kevin McDonough is here in his 3rd year. He's been working with the defense, and I think he's really developed, and we're giving him a ton of responsibility there to kind of coach the defense.
And D3, having so few assistant coaches, it's like this with SIDs too.
Right,
you do so many different things.
Sure.
It builds you up.
Definitely.
I want to hit on the schedule this year. 5 tournament teams from last season, F&M, Cabrini, E-Town, all won conferences and made the tournament, and then York and Salisbury within the same conference here.
Sure.
What is the thinking in putting together this schedule?
So our goals that the guys make, I kind of tell them that their job is to choose their goals, and then my job is to help them try to achieve their goals, do everything in my power. Our guys want to go to the NCAA tournament. Since we've restarted our varsity lacrosse program, we've never done it here. And really, because we're in a conference with an AQ, there's only 2 avenues to get in. Mm-hmm. So one of them is to win the conference, right? And then you already mentioned, Salisbury and York are in our conference. They've gobbled up the AQs mostly the past several years. But even beyond those guys, there's a lot of really tough opponents in our conference. So if you can't win your conference, then Pool C is the next avenue, which is not winning your conference championship, but being a good enough team that you get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. So by playing the non-conference schedule that we do, if we manage to win a bunch of those games, then we're in pretty good contention for Pool C. If we aren't winning them, then hopefully we're getting better to have a better chance at making a run at the conference championship. So, not playing a whole lot of tough teams, doesn't prepare you for your conference schedule and doesn't give you a good shot at a Pool C. So, I see my job as, if that's the goal of my players, then I need to do everything in my power to give those guys a schedule to make it so that it's possible, one way or the other to make the NCAA tournament. So, hopefully this year's the year. We'll keep working at it.
How excited are you guys to start on Saturday?
They're incredibly excited. I think this has been a little bit of I think I've been indoors more in the preseason in the past, but not much more. This we've had a lot of snow, and even beyond the snow, some cold temperatures. So, we had a scrimmage on Saturday, and I think it could have gone a little bit better if we'd had some more outdoor practice time for sure, as far as riding and clearing. But the weather's looking good for this week, for us to be outside all week and to be able to kind of learn from our scrimmage and be ready to go against Ursinus on Saturday. But I think, when you just play against yourself in practice for several weeks at a time, guys want to play somebody else and put the game jerseys on. So looking forward to it.
We're fired up about it. You can watch the game on the network Saturday afternoon. Tommy Pierce, thank you for joining us in the Bobcast.
Thank you very much.
All right. Women's basketball in 3, 2, 1. Up next in the Bobcast, we have women's basketball head coach Kerry Saunders. And for the Bobcats, a pair of losses against very good CAC teams, hung tough with both of them, ultimately losing 75-67 to Mary Washington and 66-55 to Marymount. Those were two tournament teams from last season. Frostburg is now 6-10 in conference, but clinging on to that final playoff spot, one game up on Southern Virginia at 5-11, who plays the Bobcats on Wednesday. So, let's start with Mary Washington. You're down one after the first quarter. It's a 2-point game in the second quarter, and then Mary Washington ends the quarter on a 16-5 run. The Bobcats don't get back within 10 until the final 25 seconds of the game when Frostburg hits 4 3-pointers in the final 2 minutes. Really, the only difference in the game was that second quarter. What can you point to as leading to your team's downfall last Wednesday?
Yeah, the second quarter was a little rough for us. We go through these phases where we don't, we talk about playing complete games in all 4 quarters, and there's, it seems like the games that we lose, we go in and we look at the stat sheet, and there's one quarter that sticks out. And we talk about playing complete games, and that's exactly why we lost on Wednesday, is we didn't put together a complete game. And the fact that, we can make that run in the fourth quarter shows that we can play and we can play with anyone. It's just you can't pick and choose. You gotta play for 4 quarters. So yeah, that second quarter was a tough one, and it ended up being the quarter that kind of lost us the game.
That reminds me of the Southern Virginia game, that first one where the second quarter digs a big hole.
Yes.
The run in the fourth quarter is there, but just not quite enough.
Yep. Can't dig yourself a hole and always expect to get out of it. You got to be able to play consistent for all 4 quarters.
Yeah, the other 3 quarters, your team, as a matter of fact, is 4 points better, and there were some definitely good things to take away. Only 9 turnovers all day, plus 8 in that respect. 3 players in double figures being Yoder, Diggs, and Wilson. What went right for your guards, especially against Mary Washington?
Our guard, we've always been more of a guard-dominant team, with our post players really coming along this year. And I think matchups and our quickness and our athleticism a little bit outplayed what Mary Wash had. So I think our guards had a little bit of an edge as far as athleticism and creating their own shot and creating shots within the plays and that type. So yeah, I mean, those guards played well, and Yoder has really, really come along these last few games, and has really helped us out in key moments, key plays, and Kayla as well. We talked about Kayla a little bit last week, about how much she's kind of improved within these last few weeks, and we continue to see that, and she's continuing to improve and to learn, and that's what she has to keep doing to keep improving.
Other good showings. Amber Downey had a really nice day. 8 points, 11 rebounds. That's a career high. 22 minutes, most in any game except the York game, where so many players were missing due to injury and sickness and so on and so forth. What did you see from her specifically, and what worked for her in that matchup?
Rebounding. We talked to her all the time. It was the very first scrimmage of the year, and I think she had almost double-digit rebounds, and I pointed it out to her, and I said, that's what we need from you all year. It's like, points will come, you'll get some points here and there, but if you can grab boards, like, there's time and there's minutes for you. And that's exactly what she did, and we talked to her again about that after the game, that if she's in the game and she's not rebounding, it's an issue because of her size and her presence. And when she is rebounding, focus on that. And then when she focuses on that, the rest will come. And that's kind of, she got into this really, really great rhythm. And she was getting boards and keeping plays alive. And she was on the floor. And, I mean, things that we haven't seen from her in quite some time. And so we talked to her about that. It's not necessarily about how many points you're giving us every night, because those will come. It's about the boards and the heart and the effort. And she had a great game on Wednesday.
It was one of her best this season.
Yeah.
Sydney Stotler returned from injury, got 20 minutes in that game, came off the bench in both games this week. Mm-hmm. How is she reacclimating to being on the floor after missing some time?
Saturday was much better than Wednesday.
Good.
She was a little slow to what she is usually on top of in Wednesday's game. In the Marymount game this past weekend, she looked more comfortable. The game didn't look too fast for her anymore. Just kind of getting her legs back under her, which is really great because, we need a player like that, and her IQ and her length has really been able to help us. And she did a really great job defensively on Saturday. So, yeah, she's back in full force.
Had 4 blocks as well on Saturday.
Yes.
Which is what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, she did an unbelievable job against their front line. Defensively, they were struggling against her to get anything up, which was huge for us to be able to shut them down a little bit. They had a lot of points in the paint, but they weren't necessarily coming from post moves, which is where we usually struggle. So it was nice to see her kind of get back to her normal self.
And with that, let's take a look at the Marymount game. The first time around, it was a 30-point loss, 62-32 at Bobcat Arena. This one, an 11-point game against a team that was in the tournament last year, is number 24 in the country, and it was competitive for 4 quarters. I was really impressed. A 20-point first quarter, your team came out ready to play. Victoria Diggs did not even score in that quarter until the final minute or so. Where did that come from, where it was everyone ready to play and contribute from the start?
Sometimes, as a coach, you wish you knew what triggered that great performance.
Uh-huh.
But I go back to practices. Practices the night before that game. I walked out of practice that day with like a calm presence of like, my team is prepared. They understood what we went over. They understand the scout. Everyone was checked in. Everyone was asking questions. It felt more as a whole. Whereas sometimes in the past, 4 or 5 of them, you feel like get it, and, a few others don't. And I felt like for the most part, everyone understood what we were going in there and what we were going to face that next day. And there was just almost like a calming presence over the team of, we're going to go out and we're going to give it our all, and we know what's coming at us, and they played well. It was the best team basketball. You look at the stat line, and points were spread out, and one person didn't carry us the whole game, and it was probably the best team basketball we've played. And we had them. We got stops going down the stretch, and we just didn't convert it into points. A very good loss in a way of we're prepared for what's to come in this last stretch here before playoffs.
I feel like you can see the progress from the 30 turnovers to the 18 turnovers, from the 32 points to the 55 points. Mm-hmm. Outside of making threes, 0 for 9 in the second half, one of my questions was going to be, how much better could your team have played on Saturday?
We talked about Marymount, you got to play defense for 30 seconds. You can't mm-hmm. play defense for 25. And there were stretches in there where we would play defense. They'd reset in the last 7 seconds of the shot clock, they'd score because we'd relax a little. So that's where, defensively, I think we could have played better because we knew what was coming, but you have to stick with it for 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. You can't, as soon as you get on your heels, they're going to expose you. And then just executing down the stretch. we got shots. We got to be able to put them in. And some of them were open looks at the basket. So in a game like that, you have to be able to make those open shots.
Sure.
And execute, to beat a team of that caliber and the 24th ranked team in the nation, you have to be able to execute down the stretch. And we were getting stops, like I said, but shots weren't falling. So those two aspects, I think we could have played a little better, but I was proud of our fight and our grit, and I mean, the team hung with each other through the 4 quarters. So that was, as a coach, that's really, really great to see.
How do you carry that into Wednesday, Southern Virginia? That's the game of the year right now for your team. A win and you're in. Mm-hmm. A loss, you'll need some help to get into the playoffs. Katie Garish, the first time around, 19 points, 15 rebounds. The team outscored Frostburg 19-4 in the second quarter. Southern Virginia did. How do you get it done on Wednesday night down there?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is our girls want a little revenge. We didn't play well when they came up here at all. Probably one of the worst games we've played all year. So we know that we can play better. But at the same time, it's the preparation today and tomorrow that leads up to Wednesday. That they have to be focused and ready to prepare for what we're going to face on Wednesday. And it's a tough environment to go play in. It's a long trip. We're on the bus. But through all of that, we have to go out and we have to play. And, there are some things on the line. So we have to go out and we got to give it our all. There's no time anymore to not play well or not give it your all. But we'll be ready. We got 2 practices to prepare and have 2 good days, and we'll be ready.
We're looking forward to it. Hopefully this time next week we're talking about the first round of the playoffs. Carrie Saunders, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next in the Bobcast, we have men's basketball head coach Webb Hatch and men's basketball, a pair of extremely competitive CAC games this past week. A loss to Mary Washington, 81-70. That a 3-point game with 10 minutes to go. And then at Marymount, 76-74. Frostburg, a 13-point halftime lead. And then we're outscored 44-29 in the second half. And in terms of the playoff picture, the Bobcats 8-8, tied with Wesley for that final spot. The Bobcats need at least 1 win or a Marymount loss to get into the playoffs. Coach, we'll start with the Mary Washington game. Competitive in the first half, up 2 at halftime. A 3-point game 10 minutes into the second half. And then Mary Washington, 6 straight possessions they scored from the 10:30 mark through the 7.5-minute mark. Stayed a couple steps ahead the rest of the way. The difference in the game, in your opinion, what was it?
Not being able to prevent them from scoring. We are having real difficulties guarding people off the dribble at key moments in games. And we also have difficulty stopping people from scoring in the paint if they've got a post player that, has got decent low post moves. I talked to a good friend of mine last night for a long time who's a retired coach who was an NBA assistant, a Division I assistant, a D3 head coach, and a JUCO head coach. And, I said, we're losing games because we can't guard people off the dribble. And he said, you and about half the teams in the country.
Yeah.
He said that's a skill that is very lacking with players now defensively. And he said he thinks some of it may be because the rules have been changed, where you can't hand check, you can't bump dribblers anymore. So it's making it more difficult to guard people off the dribble. And there've been rule changes to try to make the game more offensive. And he said, I think that's part of it. But it's really hurt us, and we couldn't get stops when we needed them. And I've got the stats right here in front of us. We led for almost 16 minutes. The game was tied for over 4 minutes, and they led for 20 minutes. So it was anybody's ball game.
Yeah, it was.
But they had that little run, and then we couldn't come back with this bigger run. And, the 11-point win is very misleading because it was a much closer game than that. Lead changed hands. I'm looking here. There were 15 lead changes over the course of that ball game. And it was tied 6 times. So that was a tough loss when we had beaten them down there. And they are a very good three-point shooting team. They make 10 for 29, and we held them at 3 for 12.
0 for 7 in that first half as well.
So, we did a very good job of getting out on the perimeter players and taking away the three, but then we weren't able to guard them when they attacked us off the dribble. And the Cronin kid, had a really, really good game.
He had 18 in the first meeting, 23 in the second meeting.
And he's played well against us, both games. He was 9 for 11 from the floor and 5 for 6 from the line and 10 rebounds. That's 23 points, 10 rebounds. That's a pretty good ball game. So that was a tough one, and and then the game had gotten rescheduled to Thursday night. So now we only have one day to get ready for Marymount. And that's life, those things happen, but it's ironic. Mary Washington went up to Wesley on Saturday and, on one day's rest, and they got beat too.
Uh-huh.
So, both of us who had to play on Thursday night wound up losing on Saturday. And I don't think that's a coincidence, but, those things happen when you have weather issues.
Well, in Marymount, your team builds a 13-point halftime lead. 7 threes in that first half. What can you point to in that first half for building the lead?
We played about as well as we can play the first half. We out-rebounded them. We shot the ball extremely well. We only had 8 turnovers for the entire ball game. I don't have the first half stats right here in front of me, but I'm speculating we probably only had maybe 3 or 4 turnovers in the first half. We played really, 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 really well. But the second half, we didn't rebound well. And it was a huge differential in rebound in the second half, and them getting to the bucket. And then free throws. They're 20 for 28, and we're 5 for 6. And I'm not blaming the officials because we're not a particularly good defensive team when we have to guard people off the dribble. And they went to a zone defense with about, I want to say, around the 10-minute mark of the second half. And we don't play as well against zone. If I was scouting us, that would be my recommendation, to zone us. And that slowed us down a little bit, and we struggled to score, and we got some pretty good looks right in the lane, but couldn't make them. Tough loss for us.
Another game where an opposing big, Dimitri Rucker for Marymount, puts up 20 and 10, much like the Mary Washington game. He had 18 points against you guys last time. This week, we sort of returned to that theme where other talented post players have hurt your team, scoring, rebounding-wise. Are there any adjustments that need to be made after this week?
Well, we need some help inside, If you look at Ed's stats, Edwin Cole, who's our 6'6", 6'7", four-man, he's 5 for 12 from the floor for 12 points, 2 for 2 from the line. He had 15 rebounds, 1 block. He got in foul trouble. He didn't foul out, but we had to sit him for about 6 minutes in the second half after he got his 4th foul, and that hurt him. We don't have anybody backing him up with extensive experience. We've got a couple of freshmen who they really have trouble guarding, upperclassmen right now, which is not untypical. But we're season's almost over. They're not true freshmen anymore. They've come to practice 70 sometimes and all that. But that hurts us, and that we really need Ed on the floor because he's a defensive presence, and he gets a couple block shots every night and influences a few other shots. He's averaging a double-double. Most nights he's got 12 or 14 rebounds.
All year he's been top 10 in the country in offensive rebounding and block shots as well.
And I'm sure he gets tired. I probably played as few people Saturday as any game all year. We only played 8 guys, and basically we only played 7 because one of the subs only played 4 minutes.
The guards pretty much all played 37 plus.
Right. And that's the shortest lineup I've had the entire year. We had, like you said, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who played 30 plus minutes. One guy played 14, one guy played 5, one guy played 1. And that might be on me. I may have needed to sub a little more in the second half to give people some rest. But, can't do anything about it. We still shot 30 for 70, which is 43%, 9 for 22 on threes, which is 41%, and 83% from the free throw line. But the problem is we only took 6 free throws where they took 28.
Couple of trends from the last week, and then we'll get you out of here, Coach. Marymount and Mary Washington outscored the Frostburg bench 55-11 over those two games. Both Cronin and Rucker put up 20-plus points as post players. You hit your number. You got 70 field goal attempts in both games, but the opponent shot fewer field goals but a much higher percentage from the floor and more free throws. Mary Washington, 14 more free throws. Marymount, 22 more free throws. All of those things together, what would you say is the most pressing to turn around?
We've got to rebound up better, and we've got to play defense better. And if we play defense better, hopefully we foul less. It's late in the season. We're playing games that are basically playoff games for us.
Mm-hmm.
We got 2 left, and we've got to get a split. If we get 2 wins, we're probably in the tournament. So I've cut down our rotation a little bit as far as the number of people I'm playing. I think our kids are probably getting a little tired in the second half, so that's probably something I've got to look at for Wednesday night when we're down in Southern Virginia, to be able to be sure to substitute a little bit in that first 10 minutes of the second half to make sure that the last 10 minutes we're okay. Now, most of the kids will never tell you they're tired.
Yeah.
I mean, if they raise a hand and say they got to come out and they're tired, they really are. But a lot of them will, kind of try to take a possession off on offense or defense if they're a little tired and not come out. But that's something I've probably got to do a better job of subbing a little more in the second half, particularly in the first 10 minutes, to make sure we're fresh down the stretch. I don't know, but I'm thinking maybe that's part of our problem.
Southern Virginia on Wednesday. Great size, overtime game here earlier in the year. Cale Thornton had, I believe, 30 the first time around. He's their big guy. That game, you win. You're in really good shape to get into the playoffs. What do you need in that one?
Again, we've got to rebound, we've got to defend, and, we've got to shoot the ball well, which is sometimes not an easy thing to do when you're on the road. It's a long trip. 3.5 hours. You leave here at 10 o'clock in the morning for a 6 o'clock game. So, we've got to be focused, and hopefully we can get a win, and then that takes a little pressure off for the game on Saturday home.
For sure. Hopefully next week we're talking about the playoffs. Coach Webb Hatch, thank you for joining us in the Bobcast.